Hey everyone, I'm here with Karl Popham from Austin Energy. Good morning, Karl. How is your day going?
Good morning, Jason. It's going well, thank you.
Well, appreciate you coming on to talk a little bit more about electrification, maybe some of the impacts with COVID-19. So I'll just go ahead and get right into it. Does that work for you?
Yeah, it certainly does. What also is working for me is those retro headset you have. So thank you for wearing those today.
Oh yeah. Oh, thanks. They're very comfortable in the ears for sure.
Good.
Well, well, yeah. So I know you're one of the leading electrification experts in the U.S. with respect to utilities and their implementation. And so I wanted to take some time right now to get your feedback in terms of how do you think and what do you see the impact being on electrification with this COVID-19 outbreak and just trying to get your feedback there, and then also maybe taking into the context the Russia and Saudi oil 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 conflict going on as well.
Certainly. So that's a pretty wide note, if you will. I mean, short term, you're seeing a lot of industries are reacting. You're seeing a shutdown in plants, both traditional car manufacturing plants in Detroit, as well as Tesla doing a shutdown of their California plant with what's going on there. So it'll be interesting, short term and then long term. What you really have to, I think, look at during this time is who's positioned long term and who has the capabilities to kind of weather this storm and push forward. I also think it's an interesting time and opportunity for change. With crisis comes opportunities for change. So you're already having some manufacturing plants to include General Motors announcing, well, we can kind of retool for medical supplies for a while and keep our plants running that way to overall help with the crisis. So it's very admirable seeing the different companies coming in, doing what they do well, and then how can they help.
Oh, excellent, excellent. So in some of that change, and you talked a little bit more about the opportunity there. Any other specific examples of like where's that silver lining here that the industry should take note from?
Well, I think the why I'm optimistic during this crisis is I see a lot of different corporate expertise being applied to solve the problem. For example, you even have Carnival Cruises recently announcing, ironically enough, that they're offering their cruise ships to come into ports and be COVID isolation centers. I'm seeing restaurants. I have quite a few friends and loved ones in the restaurant business and how they're quickly revamping their business model from being mostly dining in to takeout, as well as leveraging gig economy technologies or platforms like DoorDash, Uber Eats, et cetera, to keep the food flowing to folks. So I'm just seeing a lot of smart people in their industries rising up, and to include the electric utilities, include the city of Austin, in my view as well, rising up, applying their expertise. And I'm just being witness to very rapid acceleration of adopting change because nothing gets people to accept change quicker than responding to a crisis.
Got it. All right. So over the past 2 or 3 years, you have seen a lot of the major oil players get into the electrification sector, whether it's charging primarily. Do you, for whether it's BP, Chevron, do you see that them continuing this like post COVID-19, or do you think they're actually pull some of those investments out there and not double down on trying to be a part of the clean tech revolution?
Well, one, you have to look in the wider context of what's going on with oil and gas. And you'd kind of mentioned it earlier about even this tiff between Russia and Saudi Arabia as a way of flooding the market with oil. And I don't think it's necessarily an attack between each other. I think it's really their common foe when you look at oil is the US and the US oil production. That's really what they're going after. In 2017, when OPEC plus, which is OPEC nations plus Russia, decided to do capacity limits, at that time, on top you had Saudi Arabia and Russia, and you had U.S. Third. And then within a couple of years, U.S. then became number one in production because you had OPEC plus trying to manage global capacity, and that lets avoid for people who are not participants in that monopoly and global trying to oil manipulation marketing, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You also look at the financial markets. You're looking at stocks, not just of COVID-19, but major players saying, I don't know how you're going to make money in the future by investing in oil and gas. So the short answer is I think it will actually accelerate
Mm-hmm.
the change. It will accelerate the investments. You also have the Federal Reserve cutting interest, the Fed rates all the way down to zero in some cases. So a lot of times change requires investments. Investment requires access to capital and cash. So now is a very affordable time to borrow money. And I also suspect there will be a lot of incentives for companies to invest. So rather than trying to use all this investment and resources to getting the back the way we were in the same vulnerable position,
Mm-hmm.
I think there will be a real opportunity to make those investments, because investments are now going to have to come one way or the other. Make that in changing the rules, if you will, for moving from oil companies, if you will, to energy companies. So Shell has recently, doing some pretty major investments to include in the EV space, buying Green Lots. So Green Lots now is a wholly owned subsidiary. It's also interesting if you look at the Green Lots marketing, they use the Shell logo now. So it's not just hey, we're going to buy this company and it's just part of this portfolio. They also understand the importance of messaging and branding the new Shell Energy Company with innovative companies in the EV space. So I think it's a real opportunity to make investments and move forward and change the rules from how global oil has historically worked for decades.
Okay, thank you. And a follow up to that, very similar in terms of what the impact is. How are you seeing this impact with GM, Ford, and several of the players that announced new models coming out? And I think there was a lot of excitement early in the year, especially after the Super Bowl, with so many people jumping into this EV space. Do you think they will be impacted by this? And does this uh, maybe put them behind a little in terms of their ability to one roll out new models, and then maybe talk a little about that? Does that allow Tesla actually to get further ahead of the market?
Well, every industry is going to be impacted. So that is, in some ways, a levelized playing field, if
Mm-hmm.
you will. It's really up to different organizations of their strategy moving forward. This time of crisis is also a time of opportunity when you're looking at is now the time to change a business model, especially if you manufacture cars and let's say you switch over new medical devices for 14 months. You make all that investment to go back to your old cars, or now since you're already having to retool anyway, you go towards the future. So I think short term, you'll see a slowdown. You might see a delay of models because consumers, I don't think, are just going to be snapping up cars in general at a typical rate. I think you're going to have consumer confidence and consumer demand. I think if someone was on the market for a new car, they might be looking at what's happening in their 401k or job security, other factors. Yeah, maybe I can drive my current car another year or two. So I think you'll overall have just a cooling off period in consumer buying, which which drives our economy, especially here in the U.S. But I still think I think longer term, and if you look 5, 7 years from now, this could actually be an opportunity to accelerate overall. But short term, there'll be a dip down, sir.
Okay, and you don't see this impacting Tesla's ability to get further ahead of the market.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think it's less about which EVs is getting ahead. I look at more of the industry
Okay.
itself. Sorry, I needed a coffee break. Um, so that's what's that's what I track is what the overall industry is doing. I still think you have some very interesting competitors like Rivian coming online. I think that's still going to happen. And I still think you'll see big investments from GM going forward. So I think overall it will all water raises all boats. I think you'll see that phenomenon in EVs. I think what you see going on with the oil markets will ultimately have an impact to support EVs. I think you'll have a short-term, dip in gas pump. That's going to be short-lived. That's not the goal of what's happening here. The goal is basically a redominance of the market and remanaging of the price for long-term high levels. Is what's going on in the market. So I think overall it's an opportunity.
Excellent. So how about are you hearing now from the infrastructure providers, ChargePoint and maybe even Greenlots? Have you heard from them? Do you see them being equally impacted, or is it a little different game for them in terms of the charging infrastructure providers?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have a call with Shell and Greenlots later this week. I'll ask them that question and how they're feeling. But I mean, that's part of our strategy now is to maintain those contacts, make sure we understand the supply chain, where are things going. I think overall, you're going to still to see companies like ChargePoint and Greenlots continue to push forward, continue to develop and launch products. I don't see a slowdown. Generally speaking, I think a lot of the technology players in this space will continue to push forward. But I will, if my thinking drastically changes after meeting with some of those folks later this week, I'll do a follow-up edit on that. But no, I think in a lot of ways, I'm seeing companies potentially just either a slight delay in plans, but the overall strategy is a continuing